Hi, I'm Hal Roberts. This is Bridge City News. Here's some of the top stories we've been following. More Canadians and Americans are being evacuated from both Gaza and the West Bank as the war between Israel and Hamas continues. Our foreign affairs expert Lisa Daftari will have the latest. A new poll suggests if a federal election was held today, the Conservatives would win a landslide majority. And we hear from Lethbridge MP Rachel Thomas, who explains why so many Canadians are leaning toward the federal Conservatives right now.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Hal Roberts.
Thanks so much for joining us. The first group of Canadians have safely crossed from the West Bank into neighboring Jordan by bus. Foreign Affairs Minister Melanie Joly says the 21 Canadians and foreign nationals left from the Palestinian territory. The federal government is still working to help 300 Canadians and their families escape Gaza after a plan to allow people to leave through Egypt fell through over the weekend. More than 4,000 people have died since the 10-day-old war began between Hamas and Israel. More than 1 million people have also been forced from their homes in Gaza. An assistant deputy minister with Global Affairs Canada says a fifth Canadian has been reported killed in Israel following the Hamas terrorist attack.
I would say it has always been a possibility that missing persons would be confirmed deceased. That has always been a possibility. It is an extremely tragic outcome. Our thoughts are with the families in all of these cases. And so in terms of kind of what we are focusing on in terms of concrete actions right now, we are very focused on addressing the cases of the three missing persons who we continue to try to locate and bring back to safety in Canada.
You know, in light of the many rallies in support of Hamas, including right here in Canada, the Trudeau government announced the appointment of Deborah Lyons as the new special envoy on combating anti-Semitism and preserving Holocaust remembrance. Lyons is the former Canadian ambassador to Israel. She says we should never forget the atrocities against the Jewish people, not only today, but also those which took place 78 years ago.
I want to acknowledge all Holocaust survivors, those who might be here with us in the room and all those across the country. They continue to instruct us because those brave and determined people, they came out of the darkness to build a better world. What great instruction for all of us right now. And let us never forget to pay tribute to the more than 6 million Jews and 500,000 Roma and Sinti who were murdered at the hands of Nazis.
Hospitals in Gaza are on the verge of running out of power, water, and medicine. The United Nations says thousands of patients' lives are at risk. The Canadian-based medical group Doctors Without Borders says it has run out of painkillers for wounded victims. With the taps dry, the UN says many in Gaza have resorted to drinking dirty sewage-filled water, risking the spread of disease. More than a week after Israel stopped entry of essential supplies in response to the attack by Hamas, all eyes are on the Rafah crossing between Gaza and Egypt. Trucks full of badly needed aid are idling after Israeli airstrikes last week forced it to shut down. Joe Fetterman with the Associated Press has an update now for us on day 10 of the war between Israel and the terrorist group Hamas.
Israel has ordered hundreds of thousands of people to evacuate the northern area near the Israeli border ahead of an expected offensive. Hundreds of thousands of people have left the area. About 500,000 people are packed into UN shelters across the territory. Tens of thousands of people are seeking shelter in hospitals, and many people are just in southern Gaza trying to stay out of the danger zone. Now, there's no word on when this ground invasion is going to begin, but the army says it is ready to pounce at any minute. Gaza is out of power. Hospitals are running out of fuel for their generators. There is little to no water in the area. There are many people in hospitals who are in bad condition, and we're now facing the risk of issues like dehydration and waterborne diseases spreading. So the situation could continue to worsen in the coming days.
Since the attack in southern Israel, which left more than 1,300 Jews dead and more than 100 others kidnapped, we've seen lone wolf jihadi attacks around the world in support of Hamas. Our foreign affairs expert, Lisa Daftari of the Foreign Desk, says Hamas challenged their supporters to attack anyone who didn't believe in their cause.
The fact that Hamas announced a day of rage, basically a day of jihad around the world, asking its followers to attack anyone who is a non-believer, not just Jews, by the way, anyone who's a non-believer. That's Christians, Jews, atheists, even moderate Muslims who do not fold under the flag of Hamas, and that is most Muslims. So they are asking them to attack, and we saw two such attacks, one in Beijing and one in France, where a teacher was killed by a terrorist who was yelling Allah Akbar as he was stabbing her and killing her.
Lisa Daftari will also address why it appeared that Israel intelligence may have been lacking during the Hamas attack in southern Israel and Gaza. She'll have details coming up later in our program. Well, even though we had a bit of wind here in Lethbridge, it's so nice that we still have some of the leaves left on our trees and all that beautiful color. Jeanette Rocher is now with a quick peek at the forecast. Jeanette, it is especially looking quite nice down by Indian Battle Park and along the Old Man River here in Lethbridge.
Yeah, no, I agree. It's just gorgeous down there in that river valley, and I hope that you've had the chance to get in there and get some pictures because it's been just beautiful with those leaves. And speaking of beautiful, Waterton Park, which is not very far away from us, the hot spot in the province this afternoon, sitting at 20 degrees. We weren't that far behind that, just a little under 20. Into tomorrow, a bit of a different story for our Tuesday. High of only 16 degrees, looking at a 30% chance of showers, also windy. So let's expect some 60 to 80K winds. Hopefully that won't blow all the leaves away. We want those for those nice warm days that are coming back to us later this week, and I'll be back later in the show to tell you all about those days.
Great. Thanks so much, Jeanette. It appears as though support for the Conservative Party of Canada is gaining more momentum. That's according to a latest poll by 338 Canada. The latest numbers show that if a federal election was held today, the Pierre Poilievre-led Tories would win 194 seats compared to the Justin Trudeau Liberals' 90. 170 seats are needed to form a majority government. The Bloc came in third with 32 seats, and the NDP a distant fourth with just 20 seats. Sarah Fisher, the Director of Communications for the Conservative Party, says groceries, the cost of fuel, mortgages and rent have all skyrocketed since the NDP have been in power in a coalition with the Trudeau Liberals. She says the Jagmeet Singh and his party has abandoned hardworking Canadians, and he simply has zero credibility. Lethbridge MP Rachel Thomas says a common-sense Conservative government will free Canadians to bring home powerful paychecks once again.
A Conservative government will take away the bridles of red tape and allow people to step into their gifts and their talents and their abilities and thrive. Because it is Canadians who are the problem solvers and the solution makers and the wealth generators that this nation needs in order to propel forward. And it is Conservatives that believe in them. The honourable member across the way rolls his eyes because he doesn't believe in the Canadian people, but Conservatives do. Conservatives believe in each and every one of them and their ability to succeed. They only need a government that's willing to partner with them, a government that's willing to rein in its spending, a government that's willing to axe silly taxes like the carbon tax, a government that is willing to take away the extra red tape and regulation that is put in place to hinder Canadians rather than facilitate their prosperity.
You know, with colder temperatures just around the corner, the Alberta government announced more funding to increase shelter space in Calgary. Social Services Minister Jason Nixon says the $762,000 in funding will help to create more year-round shelter spaces for women in the Stampede City. 40 will be located at the Mustard Seed, 18 at the Salvation Army Wagner Shelter, and 20 operated by the YWCA in Calgary.
Homelessness and addressing shelter capacity in the province of Alberta remains amongst the top priority for my department and for me personally. I'm excited to report that both within the City of Edmonton and the City of Calgary that we'll be about 1,700 emergency spaces as we go into the winter. That has taken a tremendous amount of work by both the department and the municipalities who have partnered with us, as well as, again, organizations like the Mustard Seed. What that means is that we should have enough emergency capacity to be able to deal with winter inside both of our largest cities, which will free up some time for us to actually focus on long-term housing solutions and other types of ways that we work with shelters to be able to make sure that ultimately we can help individuals move on to have very productive lives inside of the province.
Nixon says the province provides about $32 million annually to operate between 1,700 and 1,800 emergency shelter spaces in Calgary. Crews from Lethbridge and Fire and Emergency Services were called to a house fire near 10th Street and 11th Avenue South on October the 13th last week. Smoke and flames engulfed the front of the home and quickly spread to the garage. Crews were able to extinguish the fire, and fortunately, no injuries were reported. But unfortunately, a pet did die from smoke inhalation. The fire is under investigation, and damage to the home is estimated between $320,000 and $350,000. The Chinook High School football team here in Lethbridge has been allowed to resume practices, but is yet to be cleared for game action. This is a result of 4 football players from the school being charged with sexually assaulting another player who was just 16 years of age. The investigation into the incident continues. In a release, the Lethbridge School Division says new measures are being put in place to help provide a safe and welcoming environment for all members of the school's football team. They include enhanced supervision and safety practices for all team activities, trauma-informed activities to help better understand what led to this incident, education related to positive team culture and relationships, and enhanced wellness supports for members of the football team. A new temporary exhibition at the Galt Museum and Archives has been inspired by the continued war that the Ukrainian people have been forced to endure since the Russian invasion of their country began in February of 2022. It also showcases the Ukrainian immigrant experience here in southern Alberta from the mid-20th century to the early 21st century. BCN's Micah Quinn spoke with the staff at the Galt Museum, who have the details.
A video from Lethbridge's Troyanda Ukrainian Dance Club is just one part of the Galt Museum's newest exhibition called Transplanted Sunflowers.
Transplanted sunflowers are Ukrainians who have been immigrated or displaced into southern Alberta. We kind of start off in that 1920s, 30s, 40s era. So we've just come off of the First World War, kind of off of the first 2 major migrations of Ukrainians to southern Alberta, and kind of look more at the 3rd, 4th, and current waves of migration into our area.
Transplanted Sunflowers dives headfirst into the stories of 7 Ukrainian individuals, groups, and organizations that have left their mark on southern Alberta.
Southern Alberta is a place that a lot of Ukrainians call home, and we also wanted to show our support for the community right now and just, offer it as an educational tool. That's really what we're doing here. Museums have that great kind of opportunity to talk about topics that are very prevalent and very felt by our community, and that's kind of what we were doing with this exhibit as well.
The exhibition will be on display at the Galt Museum and Archives until April 7th of 2024. For Bridge City News, I'm Micah Quinn.
A total of 31 Albertans are being honored for their contributions to our province. The Canadians who were born outside of the country and immigrated to Alberta were honored with the Alberta Newcomer Recognition Awards. That includes Trishar Patel, who is an associate professor of chemistry and biochemistry at the University of Lethbridge. He won for his work in developing targeted therapies for a range of viral infections, including hepatitis B and COVID-19.
This award recognizes in 8 different categories how the work of community that was born and raised outside Canada had made impact in Alberta. In my particular case, the award recognizes my work here at the University of Lethbridge on various viral nucleic acids, recognition of human proteins, how they infect humans, and how can we develop targeted therapeutics by understanding the communications between viruses and human proteins.
The 2 other Lethbridge winners were Guillermo Eastano, the owner of On-Site Auto here in the city, who was given the Entrepreneurial Spirit Award, and Josephine Naker, a course instructor at the University of Lethbridge, who was given the Career and Academics Contribution Award. Congratulations to the winners. A very special birthday girl was honored at Green Acres Senior Living Facility here in Lethbridge. BCN's Jeanette Rocher shares how friends, family, residents, and dignitaries gathered to celebrate Lily Quinn, who blew out 100 candles on her birthday cake on Monday.
It's not every day you get to see someone celebrate their centenarian birthday. That's why Lily Quinn and her friends and family were all smiles today at Green Acres Senior Living Community. Hey! Always the jokester, people who know Lily say not a day goes by without her making people laugh.
All the smiles, except that one over there, right in the now. That's my baby.
The baby she's referring to, her daughter, Colleen Leeser, who believes it's her mother's sense of humor that's the secret to her longevity.
My mom's always had a great sense of humor, so I think that's what keeps her going. She's, she always sees the light side of things.
But Lily just thinks it's healthy living.
Never smoked.
You never smoked?
Never even tried them.
She's not on any medication at all, ever. So yeah, it's amazing, really. She's lived well.
Lily was born exactly a century ago and has seen a lot of changes in her lifetime, including 2 daughters, 4 grandchildren, and she'd lost track of how many great-grandchildren.
5 great-grandchildren? Mm-hmm. Oh, boy.
She makes me laugh every day, every single day. A couple of weeks ago, she was not feeling well, and I knocked on her door to check on her before I went home, and her response was, "Come in if you're handsome." In my 10 years, I think this is the 3rd centenarian we've had, so it is a very rare occasion, and it is extremely special.
Everyone raise a glass to Lily. Happy birthday.
For Bridge City News, I'm Jeanette Roche.
Happy birthday, Lily. 100 years young. Wow. Lethbridge celebrated a milestone on Monday. It's been 6 months since green carts were rolled out to residents across the city, and 4,000 tons of organic waste has been diverted from landfills thanks to the Green Cart Collection Program. James Nichols, Waste and Environment Collections Manager for the city, explains how they're exploring some changes as the program evolves.
So we're always looking at ways that we can improve the program. One of the biggest things that we're going to be focusing on in the next little while is food waste diversion. So while the yard waste component, that's something that a lot of people bought into immediately, we know that there's still future diversion opportunities for food waste. So really getting those food scraps, those items that people may still be scraping into their garbage at the end of a meal, throwing away items from their fridge if they've unfortunately lost them after a little bit of breakdown. Those are the items that we really want to see getting into the green cart. We know there's a lot more opportunity. So education and outreach is where we're focused now.
City officials say around 85% of residents in Lethbridge are currently participating in the Curbside Organics program. Well, it was a tasty victory for the local baseball program on Monday morning. Dozens of volunteers from the Lethbridge and District International Baseball Foundation stepped up to run the popular Jumbo Ears booth during this year's Whoop Up Days. The outcome of the charitable partnership is a donation of more than $18,000 from Lethbridge and District Exhibition. Lethbridge head coach Chance Wheatley explains how the funds raised will be used.
Essentially what the money will be used is just trying to keep the cost down for parents instead of, having to raise prices every year. We can keep fees as low as possible and allow us to, do our trips and pay for facilities and all that sort of stuff.
Our partnership with the Lethbridge and District International Baseball Foundation really gives us an opportunity to give back to the community in a different way. For us, with the Jumbo Ears partnership and specifically the charitable piece, but also the volunteer hours that come back to Whoop Up Days, we truly wouldn't be able to make Jumbo Ears a success without all of the hours and hard work that this group puts into the Jumbo Ears program.
Jumbo Ears is part of a charitable giving campaign associated with Whoop Up Days that includes the Lethbridge and District Exhibition 50/50 Lottery, pancake breakfast, barbecues, and other events which raise more than $68,000 for local charities this year. October is Breast Cancer Awareness Month. Now, according to the Canadian Cancer Society, each year around 27,900 Canadians will be diagnosed with breast cancer, and thousands more are currently living with the disease. In 2022, it's estimated that over 5,000 women died from breast cancer. That represents about 14% of all cancer deaths in women last year. Health officials say around 15 women will die from the disease each and every day. According to AHS, women between the ages of 45 to 74 are most at risk of developing breast cancer. To help detect the disease early, a mobile mammography trailer will be set up at the Crow's Nest Sports Complex from October the 27th through November the 7th. Health officials say appointments will be required for those who want to be tested. A woman who battled breast cancer for over 20 years passed away over the weekend. Hollywood actress Suzanne Somers, best known for her role as Chrissy Snow from the 70s TV series Three's Company, died on Sunday morning. Somers, who was also an entrepreneur, also had roles on The Rockford Files, Magnum Force, and The $6 Million Man. She shared on her Instagram feed that her breast cancer had returned. She was first diagnosed with the disease along with skin cancer back in 2000. Suzanne Somers was 76 years of age. Well, we had sunshine mixed with clouds today and fairly warm here in Lethbridge. Jeanette Rocher is in now with all of the weather details. Jeanette, we've also seen quite a bit of wind lately, but fortunately, some of that spectacular color still remains on many of our trees here in Lethbridge.
Oh, I hope so, because you are right, Hal. More wind to come tomorrow. Unfortunately, we're looking at 60 to 80 kilometers per hour. High of only 16 degrees. Also, we're seeing some showers as well. We're looking at a 30% chance of rain there. So, yeah, I agree with you with those leaves. Let's just hope and pray that they stick around, because look what's coming at us here later on in the week as we get into Wednesday. Mix of sun and cloud, looking at 21 degrees, up to 24, though, for both Thursday and Friday. Yeah. Lots of sunshine as well. Down to 12 degrees on Saturday. I don't know what's happening there on Saturday, but not great things. And then I hate to say this, but it looks like we could possibly see that dreaded S word, possibility of rain or snow on Sunday, and only one digit there, looking at 9 degrees. So long, double digits. We're going to enjoy you for now, though. Average high for this time of year, 14 degrees. Average low, 0. High temperature on this day back in 1963, that was 27 degrees, and the lowest was minus 11. That happened back in 1969. Sun rose this morning at 7:54. Our sunset this evening at 6:39 p.m. We're looking at 10 hours and 45 minutes of daylight. Okay, on the west coast, Victoria seeing some periods of rain, high of only 14 degrees. 14 as well in Vancouver, looking at up to 5 millimeters of rain tomorrow. 12 degrees in Edmonton, seeing morning drizzle. Calgary looking at a 30% chance of showers. Also 60 to 80 K winds there, high of 13 degrees. In Calgary tomorrow. Looking to the rest of the prairies here, 17 for a high, 30% chance of showers in Saskatoon. Showers expected also in Regina tomorrow, 19 for a high and a high of 17 in Winnipeg with partly cloudy skies. As we get into the central portion of the country, looking at a high of 15 degrees in Toronto with a mix of sun and cloud, mainly clear skies in Ottawa, 15 for a high. 15 also the expected high tomorrow in Montreal with a mix of sun and cloud. As we get into Atlantic Canada, we're seeing lots of precipitation now. So we're seeing a 30% chance in Fredericton, high of 13 degrees, 2 to 4 millimeters expected tomorrow in Halifax, high of 11. 11 as well in Charlottetown, looking at 60% chance of showers. Now, what's happening in St. John's? We're seeing a rainfall warning in effect. Could see up to 10 millimeters of rain this evening and another 40% chance of showers tomorrow, high of 6 degrees. Also, a special weather statement in effect in this area as well, as we're seeing a high tide. So basically elevated sea levels. We're going to be seeing large waves and pounding surf. That should be happening this evening during high tide and as well into Tuesday morning. So there you go. That is your forecast.
The Dairy Farmers of Canada wants the Canadian Dairy Commission to delay any price adjustment on milk until further notice. The recommendation comes during ongoing food inflation and pressure on the food industry to stabilize prices. The Commission reviews the price dairy farmers are paid for their milk every fall, with adjustments to that price made in February. The formula determined by the Commission that could go up by as much as 1.77%. The Bank of Canada's Business Outlook survey has dropped to its lowest level in almost a decade. It is down due to companies expecting slower sales growth in 2024. More business owners are thinking that higher interest rates will be a drag on sales and investment plans. The survey also suggested that inflation expectations among businesses edged down but remained higher than before the pandemic. It found the rising cost of living remains the most pressing concern for consumers. Flair Airlines said they could be flying from Lethbridge to Tucson, Arizona, allowing Albertans a winter getaway, but sadly put those plans on hold due to regulations and logistics reasons. Trevor Lewington, CEO of Economic Development Lethbridge, has an update and says, unfortunately, nothing has really changed at this point in time.
Flair did announce at the beginning of September, just last month, that the planned route to Tucson would not be starting this fall. So as you pointed out, the seasonal service was originally supposed to start in December of last year. That was postponed due to some technical and supply chain reasons, and unfortunately it will not be starting this year either. The city is continuing to plan for future investment in the airport. Regional airports can have huge impact in driving tourism and economic development. So the city's focus, I think, is to make sure YQL is ready for Flair or any other low-cost carrier that wants to come in the future.
Make sure you catch the entire interview with Trevor Lewington from Economic Development Lethbridge and BCN's Jeanette Rocher coming up in the second half of our program. Now, here's a look at today's markets. The TSX was up 157 points on the day to finish at 19,620. The Dow was up 314 points to 33,984. The S&P 500 was up 45 on the day to 4373, and the Nasdaq was up 160 points to 13,567. West Texas Intermediate oil was down $1.03 to 86.66 US per barrel. Natural gas was down 13 cents to 3.11 US. Gold was down $12.62 on the day to 19.20 US an ounce, and silver was down 11 cents to 22.61 US an ounce. Feed wheat is at $9.66 per bushel, barley's at $7.51, canola's at $16.37, and corn is at $8.75 per bushel. Live cattle were up 8 cents to $185.20. Feeder cattle were down $1.55 to $248.33, and lean hogs December contract was down $1.20 to $68.30. The Canadian dollar was even over the past 24 hours at 73.47 US. Recapping one of our top stories, the first group of Canadians have safely crossed from the West Bank into neighboring Jordan by bus. Foreign Affairs Minister Melanie Joly says the 21 Canadians and 4 nationals left from the Palestinian territory. The federal government is still working to help 300 Canadians and their families escape Gaza after a plan to allow people to leave through Egypt fell through over the weekend. More than 4,000 people have died since the 10-day-old war began between Hamas and Israel. Our foreign affairs expert Lisa Daftari will have more from the war in Gaza, including details of how Hamas rockets being fired into Israel are falling short and landing on residents in Gaza, killing more Palestinians. When you see news happening in your community, be sure to drop us an email at info@bridgecitynews.ca. And if you missed any of today's local stories, check out our website, bridgecitynews.ca. The war continues in Gaza between Hamas and Israel. Sadly, thousands of civilians have already lost their lives, and hundreds of thousands of others have lost their homes and have since been displaced. Now, to talk about the volatile situation in more detail is our foreign affairs expert and host of the Foreign Desk, Lisa Daftari, who joins us once again from Los Angeles. Lisa, there are reports that some of the rockets being fired by Hamas over Gaza into Israel simply didn't have the range Hamas thought and are actually falling short, landing on their own people, the Palestinians. And there are reports now that Hamas is blaming Israel for those deaths.
Yeah, of course. Trademark of Hamas and unfortunately Palestinian leadership for a very long time has been to exactly use their people as political pawns. And that means putting them in harm's way, telling them not to evacuate, putting weapons in schools, indoctrinating their children. And of course, as you mentioned, literally killing them with their own weapons by having their rockets land in civilian areas. Because at the end of the day, it's not the people that matter, but the narrative. And the narrative will be pushed further if that death toll climbs, if they have bloody pictures that are often doctored, by the way. And of course, in this case, dying by their own hands, meaning that these are weapons of Hamas that are landing in civilian areas. Opposite of that, you have the Israelis that value life, every single life being obviously very, very sacred, and loss of even one life. And that is the problem with the coverage that we're seeing in the mainstream media right now. It's people are dying on both sides, which is absolutely true. We do value life on both sides, but they're dying in very different ways. Whereas Hamas came in and actually targeted children, babies, families, civilians, because they're cowards. They're not going up against the military. And on the other end, you have retaliatory strikes by the Israelis trying to evacuate civilian areas, handing out leaflets, making the announcements, trying to use the UN as a mediator to get people out of harm's way, because that is not the goal of the Israelis. It's not to kill civilians. And this is very much lost on the mainstream media. It's very much lost on the protesters that are on the streets of Canada, the United States, all weekend, calling for an end to the Jewish state, calling for from the river to the sea. These are genocidal calls that, again, rooted in slogans, hatred, just anti-Semitism, and of course, not knowing the facts, the history, the context of what's going on right now.
Yeah, we'll talk about some of those rallies in support of Israel and Hamas in just a moment here. But Lisa, we saw some lone wolf attacks in many countries of the world showing their support of Hamas, and the FBI is warning that more may be forthcoming.
Right. And it's very troublesome, of course, here in the United States with our porous border. And we already know that over the last year, we have had thousands of individuals come over who have been detected on the FBI's most wanted list. And how that's not even considering the getaways, those who have not been, who have not come under law enforcement's scrutiny to know that whether or not they're on the FBI's most wanted list or not. So obviously, we have that vulnerability here. We know that they trickle up north into Canada as well. This immigration issue in North America is not just for the United States, but we know that we share that border with Canada, and it affects you there too. The other thing that's very, very important here to note is for those who believe this is actually over land policy, a blockade, a two-state solution, the fact that Hamas announced a day of rage, basically a day of jihad around the world, asking its followers to attack anyone who is a non-believer, not just Jews, by the way, anyone who's a non-believer. That's Christians, Jews, atheists, even moderate Muslims who do not fold under the flag of Hamas, and that is most Muslims. So they are asking them to attack, and we saw two such attacks, one in Beijing and one in France, where a teacher was killed by a terrorist who was yelling Allah Akbar as he was stabbing her and killing her. Again, it's not about any of the policies. And for those who want to talk about, Israeli treatment of Palestinians, and we can get into that for another day, there are talking points for that as well. Just understand what Hamas is doing. They are terrorizing the world. Israel is left alone to fight this for the rest of the freedom-loving world. And that is why it's so important to really understand the context of this war.
We also heard a report as well about a white man who attacked this Muslim boy and stabbed him over 20 times and attacked his mother too. So it's horrific what's happening on both sides. Lisa, why does it appear that Israeli intelligence may have been lacking with Hamas attacks? You would have thought maybe the Israeli government would have known something was coming.
Right. And I'm sure that in the days to come, we will have more intelligence. But for right now, they're just calling it an intelligence failure. It doesn't really sit well with me. I've been covering this part of the world for a very long time. And Israeli intelligence is top notch because it has to be. They can't really let their hair down for a moment or look the other way. And a lot of the justifications or the reasonings that we're hearing, about it being a weekend, being a holiday, domestic turmoil inside Israel. National security never has to do with those kinds of things because, again, they know they're surrounded by enemies who want them dead at any hour. It's something that they have always been focused on. And how, when you look at the minuscule terror plots that Israel has foiled in places like Cyprus and Greece and all over the world, and even in helping the United States in foiling some of our terror plots here, it doesn't really make sense that Israel would have missed this one. And the United States as well, by the way. The United States has admitted to also not knowing anything about this, not having any intel on it. So I think in the days and months to come, we're going to hear more perhaps about this. I know there's going to be plenty of investigations. And I will say this, though, the complexity, the severity, the sophistication of this is nothing like, it's not anything what Israel has seen or dealt with in the past with regards to Hamas or any other terror organization. Shows the fact that Iran's regime was pulling the puppet strings on this one. The scope of this was so tremendously large, well plotted, and it was meant to be a surprise attack, land, air, sea, and that has partially to do with it. But again, we'll find out why Israel had no clue that this was happening right under their noses.
Canada's flying Canadians out of Israel right now, and the U.S. State Department is evacuating around 32,000 U.S. citizens who are seeking to leave both the Gaza Strip and the West Bank.
Yes, it's very important that the United States be proactive about this. They've been actually dragging their feet a bit. A lot of people are against bringing people into the United States any more than we have to, right? At this point, we have, important to get American citizens out first and foremost, and then deal with the refugee issue as a secondary issue. We know that 30 Americans have died in the attacks, and we are believing at this point, according to Secretary of State Antony Blinken, that there are Americans among the hostages as well that are still being held by Hamas in Gaza. And so, the United States obviously as a priority is keeping an eye on those hostages, on the Americans who are in harm's way, and dealing with that right now.
Yeah, and sadly, a handful of Canadians also died during that attack by Hamas. Lisa, a report by Axios says Iran is warning it will intervene if Israel launches a ground offensive in Gaza. Many believe that Iran has supported and funded Hamas for decades and views the terrorist group as a proxy that can really carry out attacks on its behalf.
Yes. So here we have Iran's regime again with the threats. And really, we're not hearing much from the White House in terms of Iran's involvement. As a matter of fact, they're trying to distance themselves from that narrative, even though they are supporting Israel and its efforts to seek, an end to Hamas as the main goal of this retaliation. We're not seeing that connection. And my question to the White House has been and will be in days to come is how will the United States now move forward with Iran's regime? Obviously wanting to strike a nuclear deal with them for the last 3 years under the Biden administration, loosening important sanctions that have allowed Iran's regime to sell oil and bring in revenue, $60 to $90 billion of their own, which they're putting into terrorism. And of course, ignoring the Iranian people who are asking for regime change. The head of this dragon, monster, whatever you want to call it, is Iran's regime. And of course, now they are threatening Israel not to escalate this war further. Look, Israel is fighting the proxies of Iran's regime. This is Iran's war against Israel, and it launched it in a way in which the world is focused on the Palestinians, the world is focused on human rights, the world is focused on Gaza and the West Bank, and the world is not understanding the main source of evil on this planet, the main source of funding suicide bombers and terrorist groups and all these different proxies is the Iran regime. And that is what's missing again from this narrative. And of course, we would like to see more from the White House on that.
Let's circle back to the rallies for just a moment here, Lisa. We've seen so many demonstrations across North America and Europe, both in support of Israel and Hamas. Now, there are reports that the House Republicans want to introduce legislation to stem the flow of Palestinians into the United States amid the Israel-Hamas war. So how's that going to happen when you want to fly 32,000 Americans in? You maybe have some jihadists mixed in with that group that you're flying in, not vetted properly?
Right, and that's really the challenge of any group of refugees coming into the country. But we're not talking about refugees when we talk about evacuating Americans. These are American citizens who are in Israel and hopefully will be properly vetted. The secondary group that they are talking about bringing in are refugees, moving them out of Gaza, and the world opinion is, where do they have to go? So there is this desire to bring them here, and that's where you have a lot of objection as to they cannot be properly vetted. You're not able to call Gaza and get a reference or background check on any given individual, right? So it makes it very difficult. And again, I will say, when you have national security issues like this, there will always be those who are well-intentioned and are in need of humanitarian aid and in need of rescue that will perhaps be grouped together with the one or two bad apples that could be in that group. So that is why the discussion now is we cannot vet them properly. We cannot take that chance in terms of national security to bring any extremists or terrorists into the country.
Lisa, several Harvard Divinity School faculty members sent out a statement condemning Israel's oppression of Palestinians following the terrorist attacks. Now, Harvard's president, however, came out against a joint statement from over 30 student groups saying it did not represent the views of the university after the college faced heavy criticism for not condemning Hamas in the attacks.
Yeah, it's horrific what we're seeing in U.S. Universities. Top U.S. universities, I just read an article about a Columbia professor who called the Hamas attack against Israeli civilians awesome. He called it awesome. There will be an investigation, obviously, but what we are seeing is these are mostly student organizations, although there are professors involved as well. But Hal, you and I for years have talked about professors at universities being the ones who are perpetrating these ideas of anti-Semitism, masking it under anti-Zionism, not wanting a state of Israel, or talking about apartheid, or talking about all the political statements, but truly teaching and indoctrinating students with this feeling of anti-Semitism. U.S. colleges are the #1 breeding center for anti-Semitism, and that continues, of course, with this war. Imagine professors on U.S. soil living freely saying that an attack like Hamas, terror attack, was awesome. Imagine someone saying 9/11 was awesome. I mean, it is horrific to think. Imagine someone saying ISIS is awesome. It is It is so irresponsible, and I'm glad that the heads of some of these universities are taking really, and of course, Hal, I must say, it comes after a lot of pressure has been put on these universities, a lot of donations have been pulled, and a lot of bad press for them to come out with these statements, which is very unfortunate because I think these statements should have been issued immediately because nobody believes that Hamas or a terror organization killing innocent civilians and beheading babies is awesome. It's truly a sad day in America. I will say this. When I see Iranians inside Iran, when I see Palestinians inside Gaza or the West Bank saying that they denounce Hamas, that they denounce the Iran regime, that is the silver lining for me. Somebody who's been covering this area for a long time and seeing this coming of age where they understand there's a difference. You take a side. Either you're with the terrorists or you're not. And to see American professors, college students, I mean, there was a rally here close to UCLA on Saturday, where they were actually saying 6 million wasn't enough. We're coming for the rest of you. We're saying we want all of 48. That was one of their slogans as well. They're literally calling for a genocide of Jews in 2023 in the United States. Spoiled, privileged, uneducated, American students who do not know any better. And it's unfortunate when their professors are leading the way.
Lisa, we only have a few moments left here, but I wanted to get an update from you on the war in Ukraine. Any end in sight? Are there any peace talks planned between Ukraine's Zelensky and Russia's Putin?
We're not, what I've been reading in the last 12 hours has been more escalation. Those numbers climbing in terms of weapons, artillery, new shipment, by the way, Hal, that's the latest from North Korea to the Russians. They're getting, more weapons, buying more, finding new trade partners to buy weapons from. And Zelensky's hand is extended, wanting more and more money from the United States. There was early on a bill that tried to put together funding for the IDF, Israel's forces. And as we know, the Biden administration really said that they would give Israel more in terms of fighting this war against Hamas, but wanted to buddy that together with more money for Ukraine. Talk about, politics as usual in Washington, D.C., but trying to combine those two ideas and try to pass something because obviously they know that a lot of lawmakers are very eager to get that funding to Israel. The jig is up. I think after the UN meetings, Zelensky saw that the sentiment in the United States, even those who wanted for a very long time to send more and more money to Ukraine, understand that enough is enough, and there has to be some sort of de-escalation in this war, and putting more money into it is not the way. So we shall see.
She's the host of The Foreign Desk and our foreign affairs expert, Lisa Daftari. Thanks so much for joining us once again from Los Angeles.
My pleasure. Thank you, Hal.
Well, now that the fall season has settled in, that usually means a shift in people's spending. First, it was back to school clothing and supplies, then Thanksgiving, and now we have to start thinking about the big holiday just around the corner. Always an expensive time of year, so we're going to talk a little bit about economics and how things are looking on the economic front for Lethbridge in southern Alberta. And to do that, I'm going to bring in Trevor Lewington, who's the CEO of Economic Development Lethbridge. Welcome back to Bridge City News, Trevor. Great to have you on again.
Thanks so much, Annette. Great to see you. Always a pleasure.
Okay, great. So, Trevor, we're talking economics here, the economy. What is the overall economic trend right now? What's going on?
Well, the economy's been a bit of a mixed bag this year. Alberta overall is forecasted to grow by about 2.7% this year, which is actually pretty healthy, all things considered. Rising oil prices have certainly boosted the provincial government's coffers. But growth is expected to slow down next year in 2024 to around 2%. And really, it's higher interest rates and continued inflationary pressure on prices that are continuing to be a bit of a drag. And ultimately, inflation is still above the Bank of Canada's target. So we might even see some more interest rate hikes ahead. And that's, of course, a concern for everyone.
Definitely. That's unfortunate news for sure. And that growth does seem to be happening faster than we can keep up with it for sure. So what about employment? Is unemployment up or down?
Yeah, unemployment locally has been actually very stable for the last 6 months. We've been kind of hovering just over 5%. And that's a pretty consistent number where we've been for the last couple of years after the pandemic. So that's actually good news. We have seen lower unemployment in our region in the past, but that can be very challenging for employers when there's not enough people looking for work. So 5% is a pretty healthy number. means there's enough movement in the economy that there's people looking for work and employers can find some level of staffing, which is good news.
Okay, yeah, that is. I was going to ask you how businesses are faring now with the challenge of finding workers to fill those job vacancies. Are there any particular sectors that are just seeing more labor shortages than others?
Yeah, great question. So in the Lethbridge Medicine Hat economic region, that's how the government of Alberta sort of looks at this. In that particular region right now, there's just less than 6,000 vacant positions. So there are 6,000 jobs up for grabs. Employers would fill those today if they could find a qualified person. That's a pretty big number. It's about double from where we were just before the pandemic.
Wow.
So that's a bit of a challenge for employers. It means, potentially they're having to throttle back on production or maybe reschedule a project because they can't get staffed up. And in particular, it's positions like equipment operators, class 1 drivers, the skilled technical trades are still a bit of a gap right now.
Wow, that's actually really surprising because those are quite popular programs at the college and whatnot. So it looks like those students are picking the right fields.
Yeah, for sure. We've seen enrollments at both of our post-secondaries increase, which is the good news. And typically, if we look at those 6,000 job vacancies, the average hourly wage is north of $22 an hour. So these are definitely not minimum wage positions. People can find the skills and find the training. We've got to figure that out.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic for students looking to go into those fields for sure. What about small businesses? Are we seeing more or less business startups?
The total number of business licenses issued in the city, which is sort of the way we measure that, is about the same as it's been for the last couple of years. We did lose a number of businesses, of course, during the pandemic. We did see business licenses decline. We've since recovered back, but it's been very stable. We haven't seen a big gain or a big loss. And so I guess that's the good news. That's the silver lining, is at least those numbers are pretty steady.
Yeah, for sure. What are you hearing from business owners? Is red tape about the same, or has it worsened or improved?
Who doesn't love red tape, right? I mean, that's always the fun part.
Yeah.
The province recently announced that it's cut red tape at the provincial level by about 1/3 over the last 4 years. So they've really been focused on eliminating duplicate processes, eliminating rules that don't provide sort of that meaningful protections. The government really wants to speed up the time it takes to approve projects. In the city, municipalities have been working on that as well. It's been a mandate from the province that municipalities look to improve permit times, for example, and make that process simpler. The challenge, of course, is that red tape exists for a reason, usually. Public safety considerations, building code. So although it's important to eliminate red tape that's unnecessary, we also want to make sure that people are protected and that companies are following the right processes. And so an example that's coming up in Lethbridge, the city's just about to embark on a rewrite of the land use bylaw. That bylaw determines where stuff gets built, what kinds of buildings can go up, where businesses can locate. So that's a great opportunity to make changes that might speed up development. And so this is the time when people want to have input and share with the city their thoughts on what that could look like and influence those future changes to reduce that red tape.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so we're kind of right in the middle of the agricultural food belt. So what kind of feedback are you getting from the agribusiness sector at this point?
Yeah, this, of course, is Canada's premier food corridor, and dryland crops, unfortunately, were pretty negatively impacted by the drought conditions. Many rural municipalities across Alberta, including our region, declared states of agricultural disaster. This was the second consecutive year of drought, and so there's a real concern right now going into what could be a third. The forecast is for a warmer winter with far less precipitation than usual. So I know this next statement won't win me any friends, but it would be best if we all pray for snow and lots of it to refill those reservoirs.
Yeah, it's funny, when I spoke to the guy from the Farmer's Almanac, he predicted something completely opposite. He said lots of snow and lots of cold. So we'll see. Maybe we'll meet somewhere in the middle there, Trevor.
Yes, I guess we'll see what happens, right?
Exactly. Now, have you heard how the surrounding southern Alberta communities are doing? Are they doing any better or worse than Lethbridge is?
Yeah, most of the measures that we track are for the census metropolitan area, which is a fancy way of saying the city itself, the surrounding Lethbridge County, as well as the small communities like Coaldale and Colehurst that are part of the county. So when we report our measures, we are looking at the region. The good news is commodity prices are up. So growers with irrigated acres have actually done okay. They've had increased revenues to offset their costs. Cattle prices are also up. So a lot of our beef producers have been able to realize some growth. And we have big projects like the expansion of McCain, That's a $600 million project to double the size of their facility in Lethbridge County. And of course, local construction companies benefit from that. And in the future, as they add, 8 to 12,000 acres of potatoes, that's good news for local growers as well. And it's actually the biggest project in McCain's history. So very
Wow.
excited to see that in our region.
Oh, yeah, that's fantastic news. So speaking along the same vein there with agriculture, what kind of economic results are we seeing from the Lethbridge and District exhibition expansion so far, their new agri-food hub?
Yeah, the new Agri-Food Hub and Trade Center opened with a real bang in August. They had more than 100,000 people go through the building in the first 4 weeks of it being open. That was driven, of course, by record-setting attendance of Whoop-Up Days. So that's very exciting, and I think underscores just how important this project is and just how big an impact it can have on the city and region. The Lethbridge and District Exhibition, that's the organization that operates the Agri-Food Hub, has estimated in their studies that the annual economic impact of the facility and all of the things that they do is about $90 million a year to the community. So we finally have a world-class venue to host the world and showcase everything that we do, right? We can attract national and international events. We can grow Ag Expo, for example. That's a huge event and has always been a big event in our region, but it's been maxed out. You literally couldn't fit any more humans into that previous space. And so now we've got some great, huge trade halls with power and internet and rigging capacity that's not found anywhere else. So I think it's really exciting to see what the possibilities are that are created by the new Agri-Food Hub and Trade Center.
Definitely, it'll be fantastic for tourism. And speaking of tourism, here's a big one. Flair Airlines. At first, they were coming to Lethbridge Regional Airport. Then it was paused. Then it was on pause. Now paused again. A lot of issues there. But are there any updates on Flair Air potentially coming to Lethbridge?
Yeah, unfortunately, that's not a great news story. Flair did announce at the beginning of September, just last month, that the planned route to Tucson would not be starting this fall. So as you pointed out, the seasonal service was originally supposed to start in December of last year. That was postponed due to some technical and supply chain reasons. And unfortunately, it will not be starting this year either. Flair, like most airlines, has really struggled with financing and operations at this time. And even dominant players like both Air Canada and WestJet have really been consolidating routes and making big changes to their networks over the last 6 months. So, the city is continuing to plan for future investment in the airport. Regional airports can have huge impact in driving tourism and economic development. So the city's focus, I think, is to make sure YQL is ready for Flair or any other low-cost carrier that wants to come in the future. But no news in the short term, unfortunately.
Yeah, I thought that. I think part of the issue too was runway issues. It doesn't have the capacity to hold the 737 and other issues. So that means more airport expansion. So speaking of expansion, how's the construction industry going? Is it still continuing strong, Trevor?
Yeah, the construction industry has really been feeling the impact of increased costs. Inflation on building materials, for example, combined with also higher interest rates, has made it very challenging. When we look at housing starts, for example, inside the Lethbridge census metropolitan area, housing starts are down 82% when we look at June of this year compared to last year. So last year, mid-year, we had about 429 housing starts, which was a great number. So far this year, we only have 79. So that's a bit of a concern. Building permit values, and we look at building permit values because they're a forecast of projects to come. Building permit values are down almost 20% compared to last year. And even commercial real estate, so that's both lease and sales of commercial properties, down 32%. So, I don't think we're going to see a major change or improvement for the remainder of the year. It's going to continue to be challenging in the construction sector. The only bright spot, and it's a bit counterintuitive, notwithstanding everything I just said, employment in construction is actually up. So the construction sector added 800 jobs just last month, even though there's less projects. So we don't quite know what's going on there, but employment is strong. The prospects, unfortunately, in the short term are not that great.
Right. Okay. So you mentioned housing projects and real estate not doing great then. I was going to ask you if we're seeing any changes in the real estate market with the, especially now those interest rates are rising like crazy.
Yeah, I think people are definitely thinking twice. The good news is that prices have been relatively stable in our market. So if you're selling, you're not in a loss position. If you're buying, you're not dealing with crazy inflation. And we still have one of the most affordable markets in Canada. We still see investment, people coming from places like Ontario, Vancouver, where they're selling properties for north of $1 million, and they come here and the same property is only $300,000 or $400,000. So still a good place to invest, still a good place to move to. If you're from one of those markets, we will happily welcome you to choose Lethbridge. But yeah, certainly some challenges ahead for the housing market.
Yeah, add to the growth in the province that we're seeing there. Okay, so we talked about construction. What about the manufacturing sector? How are things shaping up there?
Yeah, manufacturing has actually been a bright spot for us as well. So employment, for example, over the last year grew by some 1,300 positions. So that's very exciting. We saw large growth in terms of the number of jobs in manufacturing. Local manufacturers, of course, have a really big impact when you look at their suppliers and their vendors. You think about their supply chain, all of that ripples through the economy. So always good to see strong performance in manufacturing. And one of the measures we look at is exports. And unfortunately, it's only an annual number. But in 2022, exports from Lethbridge were just over $2.1 billion. And that's doubled from 5 years ago. So we've seen very strong growth. And I don't think, most people that live here don't realize that we have everything from commercial, aluminum doors and windows that are manufactured here to actually pre-manufactured homes, even to helicopter engines, as well as our food business. So many great things come out of the Lethbridge manufacturing sector.
That is very, very cool. So, Trevor, what are your thoughts on where Lethbridge, the economy in Lethbridge is headed over, say, the next 6 months?
Yeah, at the end of the day, I remain cautiously optimistic. The fundamentals of the Lethbridge economy are strong. We have a pretty diversified economy. We have, some of the lowest housing costs. We remain an attractive market for people looking to choose Alberta from other parts of the country and other parts of the world. We have a pretty diversified manufacturing base that's doing well, and we have strong public sector institutions like the college and the university that help provide stability to our economy as well. And, frankly, some of the biggest risks as we look forward are things we don't have a lot of control over. So things like the weather and how that sets us up for next season in the fields, or some of the geopolitical events like the continued devastation in Ukraine and the broadening crisis in the Middle East. Those will have an impact, and then we just have to manage accordingly.
All right. Thanks so much, Trevor. Looks like we're about out of time, but we appreciate you, as always, being here today with us.
Thanks for the opportunity.
Absolutely. Trevor Lewington is the CEO of Economic Development Lethbridge. I'm Jeanette Roche on behalf of all of us here at Bridge City News. Thanks for watching.